Welcome to Pop Culture Addict. Our guest today is the man behind the iconic voice and personality of Charlie Brown, at least the version of Charlie Brown that I grew up with. So you may know him from the animated series and some of the movies that involved Peanuts, the creation of Charles Schulz. Now, he has also had many guest star appearances in pop culture TV shows and movies like Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, Different Strokes, Silver Spoons. He was in part of Gremlins. Family Ties. There's like a whole lot more. We could continue to list things, but we're not going to. But instead, we're going to direct our attention to our guest and welcome Brad Kesten to Pop Culture Addicts. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Thank you. Thank you. Very glad to be here.
Yeah. Very excited to have you here today. You know, growing up, everybody watches different forms of Charlie Brown, and
Sure.
You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and some of these others that you were a part of. So it was kind of exciting for me to realize that, oh, hey, Brad's the voice of I got to talk to Brad. Brad and I need to have a conversation. But before we get into anything Charlie Brown related or anything along those lines, or voiceover related or acting related, we always hear, because Kathleen and I are giant nerds, and we freely admit that we are giant nerds. We like to know the origin stories.
When I'm not here.
We like to know the origin stories of our guests. So in the case of Brad Kesten,
Right.
When you were a young man growing up and you saw all these things going around, what were the things that influenced you to look at a career in the arts? And what was the pathway to you getting to acting?
Growing up, I really never gave it a lot of thought. It was more my mom had gotten me into it. We moved to California, Los Angeles, when I was about 8 years old. And my mom was kind of more, show business, not obsessed, but interested in show business and things like that. And we came here and she did we drove up to like Burt Reynolds' house, and she made me get out and push the ringer at his gate and asked to see if he was home. And, we did the touristy kind of things like everyone does when they first moved to California. And we would frequently go to Universal Studios, not the tour, but the backlot side, and you could have dinner. This is back in the days, things were a little bit more free, and you could walk onto the lot without a pass to go have lunch at the commissary. You're really not supposed to, but we did it anyway. And the commissary is where all the stars have lunch when they're, breaking from whatever if they don't have craft services on the set, they can go have lunch in the restaurant. And it was kind of a place to be seen. There's picture stars on the walls and things like that. And when we left, somebody on the lot had asked if I was a TV star, something along those lines. And I think that was kind of like the light bulb over my mom's head. And she went trying to figure out send out pictures. And I'm blanking her name, the mom from the Partridge Family, Shirley Jones.
Yeah.
So Shirley Jones and her husband, Marty, were nice enough to get back to my mom, how she got their address to their office and whatnot. She asked them a bunch of questions, and Shirley referred a bunch of agents to us, and they were like top talent agents, and they all wanted me. And we picked one of them, Wormser Hofana Joseph, which specialized with children. And the rest kind of is, my history. The rest is history. They kept me super busy. I had a commercial agent and a theatrical agent and a voiceover agent, and did some modeling stuff. And it was just constant, almost every day after school, like 3-4 hours a day. Didn't get home until like 7 o'clock for at least four nights a week. Super
wow.
It was a crazy childhood that I liked. I never complained about it. It was fun. All my friends were the friends that got the kids that kind of eerily looked a little bit like me, because we all went from one interview to the next to the next. So it was like all these kids had that same look. It was like a Corey Feldman was always like, we were always not following each other, but like going to the same interviews, and Jason Hervey. And there was like a group of maybe like 7 or 8 kids. And we all grew up kind of running on that cycle.
That actually was exactly the first question I had for you, was about your group of friends, because that's not a typical childhood by any means. I mean,
I didn't know that. And that's the
That's
weird thing.
true.
That was a typical childhood, which is why most childhood actors are really screwed up when they become adults. Because they don't they
Right.
quit the industry and they don't know what to do with themselves. They just crave
Sure.
freedom, but they don't know what freedom sucks. I mean, like, it really does. To be free, it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's like we grew up with somebody telling us where to go, what to do, what to wear, how to act.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of like fight that as you become a teenager and you realize, oh my God, that was the best time of my life when I didn't have so much freedom to make your own choices. And, you cross your fingers and pray to God that, they don't go the bad path, which unfortunately happens to a lot of people. Yeah. So
plus you realize that adulting sucks. So I mean,
adulting is horrible. It's horrible. And
it is.
It's a terrible thing. Then that's something that nobody taught us. Nobody taught me. It's not really taught. My school was 3 hours a day on a film set or a soundstage set. And it was either 1-on-1 or 1-in-5. That was the ratio. One teacher for one kid or 5 kids. It's also a reason why a lot of actors wind up getting to like Harvard and Princeton.
Yeah,
because they had 1-on-1. If I had 1-on-1 training my entire life, I got A's on everything that I got. So those were like my best grades.
Well, that is a huge advantage over the public schools with 1 to 25, 1 to 30.
40. Before COVID, it was like I'm in LA. It was like 1 in 40, and they were still shoving more kids into the classroom.
Wow.
I know when I was growing up, it was 1 to 25 or 1 to 30. Yeah. But still, I mean, that's a lot. It's exhausting enough as a mom of one.
Yeah.
And you're trying to teach her things and trying to make sure that she's learning. I can't imagine a teacher with a group of 40.
With 35 other little butt heads that you can't do anything to.
So. I much preferred the 1-on-1 and these kids that went on interviews with me for years. Those are your friends. Those are the ones that I mean, I had friends that were like in school that I kind of grew up with, maybe like 1 or 2, 3, 4 of them that you're close to, but the majority, you don't have like a gang of friends growing up. It was basically my showbiz. I call my showbiz friends, who I'm still friends with a couple of handfuls now, maybe like, 5 to 10 people that I've known for 42 years. I have more in common with them and more kind of a nostalgic. We all share the same nostalgia for the old days, rather than like the regular friends that, okay, maybe I played baseball for a few years because I wanted to have a normal childhood, but I hated it. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't wait to get a job and get like a commercial that, you're going out on 3 commercials a day, 4 days a week. You have an average that you're supposed to get. You'll get like 1, 2, and 10. You'll book 2 and 10. You get a toy, like I got a reward, like a dog. So what it was, you got a treat. If you, that was my incentive. I was the only kid in 6th grade with a king size waterbed. It was ridiculous. I mean, like, that's what I wanted. It was the 80s, 1981. What does Brad want? I want a waterbed from the Waterbed King, and whatever. And it was beautiful. It was a great head. You remember them with the mirror and the headboard and the stacks for your books.
Ridiculously comfortable.
It was ridiculous that I had one. And it was just, but it was, I got it for, I don't even, now that I'm thinking, I can't even remember. It was like, I think a Burger King, and I booked a Burger King and a McDonald's commercial in like the same week. And I got like, what do you want? And it was only like $600. And by saying only $600, that's kind of the ridiculous of it. Right. $600 now is not a lot, but $600 in 1981 was like maybe $1,500. Who gets a 10-year-old kid a $1,500 waterbed? It was awesome. I loved it. But it's I look back on it now, and it's just kind of like I shake my head. I would have never gotten my daughter a waterbed, just regardless. Waterbeds are like ridiculously like fragile. Like you jump on it with like your keys, and you wind up having a flood in the upstairs bedroom.
One wrong thing in the pocket. That's right.
Yeah, it's I look on it with just stupid nostalgia. And I have friends that have the we all share the same kind of, like, can you believe that we had this, that this was our life? And some people had more normal childhoods than others. And some of them were, a little crazier than others, but it's all that shared experience that keeps us still friends.
So, I mean, you're saying that keeps you still friends. So you're still in touch with some
Everybody.
of them?
Everybody. I'm still in touch with probably 20 actors that I've known since I was between 8 and 10.
Oh, that's cool.
A lot of them I see, like the autograph shows, if we go to like Comic-Con and we're at a table.
Oh yeah.
That's like seeing all my buddies. It's like sitting at the lunch table at school in a way.
Yeah.
High school
It's a
reunion.
weekend with your friends. So it's like if my manager goes, oh, you're booked to go to Chiller, in New Jersey, I'm stoked because I know at least like 5 to 10 people that are going to be signing there. And it's like, okay, I'm going to be going away for 3 days and I can go hang out with my friends, and they're all either
cool.
flying out of Los Angeles. And so it's kind of, that's always fun. But yeah, I'm friends with more showbiz kids than my regular friends outside of Facebook.
I think that's an insight into that world that not many people have, from the outside looking in, because from the outside looking in, it just, to me, it's always been, oh, hey, it's just some guys here, just doing getting some extra money for from their career and things like that. And I never really thought of it as kind of like a reunion of sorts and a chance to hang out with your pals. And that's kind of kind of makes it a more of a fun experience now, because I always thought that, some of these guys, I see people at different tables, the different cons that we've gone to, people standing there and talking at different tables and people walking up, shaking hands, giving each other hugs. And it's like, oh, hey, they probably just know each other from other, from a couple different jobs or things like that. I've never really thought of it from that perspective, that it's, guys who've been doing this for years, seeing each other and having a chance to catch up. And,
Yeah. A lot of those people, if they're in their, 50s and 60s and they're doing whatever convention, they've known each other probably since they were 10 years old, 12 years old, if they're from that era.
That's cool.
So, chances are they did the same thing as I did. They went from studio to studio, from casting call to casting call. And even if they were a few years off, they probably knew each other in passing from parties, from award shows, from, same representation, their agent's office. So it's, going to them. Yeah, it's fun. You make a little extra money if you've got a fan base that cares. But, the flip side of that is I get to hang out with friends for a couple of days and, so see them a few times a year, when we're not busy in our own lives. We've got
That's
like awesome. 2 or 3 days to just go to the bar and have a few drinks and just have some fun.
So let's talk a little Charlie Brown. Let's change directions here just for a quick moment. Now, Charlie Brown originally came out in the 1960s. You weren't born until 71. So obviously you're not the first to voice Charlie Brown. That was Peter Robbins, who sadly passed away earlier this year. As a young man going into that, were you coached how to approach the voice of Charlie Brown, or is this something that you just went for? And the reason I asked that is because we've talked with different people who have come in after the fact. Like we talked just a couple weeks ago to Daphne Maxwell Reid, who took over as Aunt Viv in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and how she approached that role coming into it. Because she wasn't the first Aunt Viv. And so it's, again, for us as non-actors, it's kind of neat to have the perspective of somebody who took on a role that has already been established, was already going. So as a young man, were you coached how to approach it, or did you just sit down in front of the mic and were you just Brad? I
was just Brad. I had like I hear from other people, like Keith Coogan, who interviewed for Linus. He had told me that it was, and I wasn't even aware of this. He was, that they had looked for the Peanuts characters like far. It was like a nationwide search. They were looking in New York. They were looking in places in the Midwest that had, a voiceover hub, and all through the West Coast. There were like hundreds and hundreds of kids interviewing for this role. I had absolutely no idea. I didn't know if I cared if that was happening or not. I was like, my thing was, I knew what interviews I had for the day. My mom would drive me to the said interview. We'd rehearse the lines beforehand, and then I'd be called. I'd go in, I'd do my lines, and then I'd go to the next one. And I think I did it that way to separate myself from the constant no, the rejection aspect of it. I never really got upset. If I didn't get a role, if there was a role that I really felt that part with doing the actor thing, that role is me. And if I didn't get it, and there's more times I didn't get, I could name the amazing movies on my fingers that I didn't get that really killed me, maybe 10 out of hundreds. Okay. So I separated myself from if I didn't get it. I knew what Charlie Brown sounded like. I already had a low kind of, not depressed sounding voice, but like just, I wasn't a soprano. I didn't talk with a high pitched voice. So I kind of knew the pace of what Charlie Brown was because I was already a fan of the show and the comics. And so I went in there and did my impression of Charlie Brown. What I found out after the fact was, as Lee Mendelson, who the producer of it, as he would take all these tapes, and at night he would sit in a soundstage and listen to them one after the next, and his son Jason was playing on the floor with like his trucks and his little toy trucks, and my voice, my reel came on the speakers, and Jason looked up and said, "That's Charlie Brown." So he went, "Really?" And then he listened to it again. And so his son would actually pick me, which I thought was cool. Neat, thing. His son had listened to these and that he was listening and looking for something specific. And then his father, I went back and interviewed again. And I think I interviewed like 3 different times, then wound up getting the job. So it was a big deal. And I didn't even realize what a big deal it was. And I think that was like a safety mechanism in my brain you want to get the but just be prepared to not get it. Do your best. And if you don't get it, don't jump off the roof. And that's, I think it's a safety mechanism my mom had programmed in me somehow. And I got it. And it was the best. It was by far the best job I ever had. Of any job from my first to last, it was the best job ever. It was the people I met, and it was pretty crazy times.
Yeah. So, in thinking of that, so I went back and I brought up a couple different YouTube screens on my computer this morning as I was kind of preparing for this conversation, and I played some of the early lines of Peter Robbins and his version of Charlie Brown, and then I had a couple of yours set up from You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and some of the TV shorts that you did, and I played them back to back. I'd play Peter Robbins, then I would play you, and I'd play Peter Robbins, and I would play you. Now, to the untrained ear, and if you're just listening, you're so very close in sound. That to me anyway, it was so very close in sound that I had to double check that I had found the right clips, and that I wasn't skipping on or listening to Peter and thinking it was you. I think it would have been closer had the technology been better in the 60s. The microphones were so much better in the early 80s than they were in the late 60s, mid 60s. I think we would have sounded closer. And I agree with you for the most part. They've always looked for a specific sound for Charlie Brown. Sure. It's just a level. Some of them, some of the voices in the past and some of them hit the mark. Some of them, in my opinion, didn't. I would say there were more that hit the mark, but there's a certain level that they were always looking for. I think that we would have gotten closer to in the 60s. It had the mic. I think the mics weren't as good. That's kind of how I kind of looked at it. Oh, I would agree with you. Yeah. The differences and improvements in technology, if you guys had both recorded, even you think about today's technology, if you guys were, as young men were able to record side by side, how close they could have made those match, Yeah, I agree. So that makes sense to me. You can even tell like by the difference between, let's say, Charlie Brown Christmas and let's say the series, the Charlie Brown and Snoopy show, the lighting, it's so much darker. I mean, it's just like the animation's different. The Charlie Brown and Snoopy show is a much brighter show. Like just the tone and the tones are different. So I think it's just technology. Oh, I'd agree. Like old South Park, new South Park.
Like the first couple of seasons of Simpsons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like there's just a total difference between 1989 Simpsons and 1999 Simpsons, and it just get
2020
better.
Simpsons.
No, I don't acknowledge it. I haven't honestly, I haven't watched The Simpsons, I think, since like the early 90s. Yeah, it wasn't really my show. I was more of a South Park guy.
There you go.
I was more of a South Park guy.
I wasn't supposed to watch it.
That was your
totally
dirty
did.
pleasure. It was your dirty pleasure.
It was the mom got home from work at 5. Simpsons started at 5, but I had a TV in my room, so if I was doing my homework, I could watch Simpsons while doing my homework, and that got me in trouble so many times.
Okay.
But I didn't learn. I kept doing it. And my mom will listen to this episode later and be like, again, well, you know what?
Yeah. There were worse cartoons to watch than that.
There were. But
hey, you can tell your mom at least it wasn't Darkwing Duck. So
there you go. Ren and Stimpy.
I was banned from watching Darkwing Duck.
There's a whole story. There's a backstory there,
There's
and it's a running. Yeah,
so
there's a running joke.
She's gonna be so mad at you.
I know, but it's worth the slug in the arm. I'm probably going to get when I meet her. So
yeah, worth it.
So
it's worth it to me
because it's a fun story. I got in trouble when I was about 4 for telling a grown-up to suck gas evildoer.
There you go.
And my mom told me I was no longer allowed to watch Darkwing Duck. It was no longer allowed in the house. And when my husband and I got married and he bought me the entire series on DVD,
there we go.
Right? It was the you can't stop me now.
That's the gift.
But
awesome.
Talking about matching Charlie Brown's voice and voiceover work, a lot of the times people think that voiceover is easier than other acting because it's not as physically demanding.
It's hard.
I can only imagine.
It's easy if you've created the character and it's yours, rather than somebody telling you how to play a character. Not Charlie Brown was easy. I kind of like I was made for that role. It was just it was an easy character to do for me. I got along well with the producers and the directors and the staff, and it was simple. There are other stuff where they're bringing you characters and they're like, tell us what this sounds like. What do you think this character sounds like? And you have to kind of create, and that's how most of like Darkwing Duck, things like that, like how you create a character out of thin air.
Right.
That's more difficult than people understand. And if you do create the character, can you do that character for 3 to 5 hours a day and not ruin your voice?
Can you do that voice?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And it's, spending the day in either you're in a small sound booth, or if you're lucky, if you're doing looping and dubbing, which I love to do, you're actually like in a theater type of situation with just glass around you in the middle of the theater. And, recording from there as you look up and you're following just the numbers. You're waiting for it to count down until you say your line, and you have to match their talking. It's not an easy job to do.
No.
But if you're good at it, then so like tap dancing, or dancing, if you're a great dancer, then it's not a difficult thing to do. But not everybody can be a good dancer. And that's the same thing with voice work. Some people they're more mediocre. There's more mediocre talent than, oh my God, like crazy, amazing, talented people. There's maybe a handful. And those are the ones that, damn it, they get all the work. They get all the work. You notice that almost every like child cartoon character is female.
Mm-hmm.
That blows me away. That almost all of them, they're all female. And that's just weird and creepy, and like what's wrong with the men? Can't they? I guess it's just they can't get their voices down to that level.
They can't go to the prepubescent.
Yeah, it's really weird that just the same 6 to 10 actors get 80% of the work. It's because it's a closed circle of extremely talented people, and you need to, it's difficult to get in that bubble. It's really difficult. If I would have kept on at it from a kid to now, I'd be in that bubble, and I'd be working constantly and be able to make a living in that industry. Because there's probably only like 15 to 20% that can make a living at it. Everyone says they want to do it, but try making a living at it, not just working, but getting paid, enough to make 70,000, 120,000 and more. So it's an interesting industry.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult industry to be successful in, not just work, but to find any little bit of success.
As you're talking about it though, and I'm like listing off the voice actors that I can think of they're in everything. They're in everything.
They're in everything. They're in everything. You look at just watch a Batman cartoon, follow the first 5 people, and then look at their resumes, and you'll find that their work begets work.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be Batman or and not get work after that in something else. There's
Right,
always
right.
But it's not a jealousy thing. I'm if anything, I'm just envious of some of these people's talent, that they can consistently work as an adult in the industry and make a living and thrive, and not ever having to go into on-camera work, which is pretty crazy thing to be able to make a living as a voice actor.
Right. I don't see it as a jealousy thing. I see it as more of a factual conversation that this is just the way it is.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that.
So Kathleen and I host another show together called Funny Science Fiction Podcast. Okay. And on that show, we talk to a lot of voice actors. And, because again, we're nerds and we like nerdy things. And, we've talked to a lot of voice actors on that show, but, a lot of them, you look at their resumes, and it was exactly what you were just saying. The shows that they've done, you'll see a lot of the same names popping up on those shows because they're able to do so many voices and do so many things. Instantly my brain goes to guys like, Rob Paulson and D. Bradley Baker, the guys that are literally
Marsh. Yeah.
The one that actually surprised me the other day is my daughter loves Superhero Squad.
Okay.
And it's just animated shorts. They're Avengers.
Uh-huh.
But Jim Cummings does Thanos' voice in that.
Yeah. He's
and
awesome.
I'm like,
Jim's in everything too.
The Pooh Bear. Jim Cummings is can do everything.
And it was so funny that I told my husband, I'm like, Jim Cummings is Thanos in this. He's like, Pooh Bear with an infinity gauntlet.
I'm blanking.
I'm like, yes.
Yeah. I'm blanking. I had his name in my head and it just disappeared. He played Skeletor in He-Man.
I'd have to.
That's what I'm saying. That. Exactly. It's like it just went right at you.
Don't worry, we have a Kathleen for that.
There we go.
Kathleen, in just a second.
No, he's in everything. I mean, because his resume is just crazy amazing, and that you can like another Jim Cummings, where you can just be there decade after decade and constantly get new work to new audiences.
Franklin Jello?
No. The older guy, white mustache.
The original Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
Alan Oppenheimer?
There we go.
Okay. I'm like, there's a list of who Skeletor's been voiced by.
His resume is just I love his resume. He's just got he's just done so many he's had so many interesting parts over the years, and I was lucky to be a part of some really interesting films and interesting movies in regards to voice work, but it's there was so many great people like Gremlins. There's so many amazing people in Gremlins. I was thrilled to just kind of be not a mogwai, like the evil Gremlins, like a backup voice for some of the characters, and got to at least voice a few of them. It would have been just cool to be the the mogwai, or that kind of thing. It's
right.
Yeah. It was just fun to be a part of some really bizarre, cool projects at the time.
Well, that actually leads me right into my next question. So you teed that one up really well.
Thanks.
So we mentioned at the outset the number of the different pop culture classics that you've been a part of. Again, Gremlins, like you just mentioned, Family Ties, Indiana Jones, and there's a whole bunch of others. You have a fun resume to go through, by the way. It was literally reading through my childhood list of things that I watched or was a part of. So it was a bit of a trip down memory lane. So I do appreciate that.
No problem.
But I wanted to ask you, and you kind of alluded to Gremlins there, but was there a role that you want people to know about outside of Charlie Brown that meant a lot to you at the time, or something that's perhaps grown on you over the years and you look back fondly at and go, man, I wish more people knew I was involved in this?
Gremlins was an interesting one. The Charlie Brown thing, I have friends that going to Charlie Brown, back to Charlie Brown real quick. I mean, I have friends that until the internet came around and you could actually prove that you were something, like if you mentioned Charlie Brown or whatever, until the internet, I have friends from the late 80s and 90s up until maybe 2000 had no idea that I was ever an actor. I was ever Charlie Brown or did voices for anything.
Right.
So once they figured out, like, how have I known you, Brad, for 20 years and didn't know any of these things? That I kind of look and like where some people knew. I would have had more game in the late. I would have had so much more game with the internet. You know, Indiana Jones, my wife still like laughs and she's like, that wasn't you. You know, like that. Gremlins, the same thing. She's like, what? I can do the voices, but she doesn't get it. One of the funny things with Indiana Jones is back in the 80s, before there was anything political correctness, it was completely normal to have, you know, a 12-year-old Jewish white kid in a studio doing Indian Pashto voices, like almost like an Apu from The Simpsons. Total stereotype, but it's not really a stereotype because it's what that person sounded like. Mm-hmm. Now they would demand that an Indian, you know, actor come in and do it. But this is just, I was like on contract with Amblin Entertainment. I was doing a lot of dubbing and voiceover work with like the Natural, Uncommon Valor, and then Indiana Jones and Gremlins. Mm-hmm. That was a reason why I was constantly doing, it was all Spielberg movies. Okay. And it was just because like work begets work. You do one, they're like, that was great, Brad. Come on in tomorrow and you can do this one for 3 days and come in the next day for 4 days. And it was doing Gremlins voices. And that was really, really cool and bizarre because I didn't even know what a gremlin was. Right. For the most part, they showed a picture of it. And then I would hear like what the main gremlin voice actor would do. And then I guess what it was maybe to bring him in was more expensive than I was already there. And can you do this voice? And it was like for, 15 minutes of stuff, I would do grunting, say a specific name and a line here and a line there. And so seeing the movie, I immediately pulled myself and I knew that was me, but it was difficult to tell people that I was in the movie because it's kind of like, even though it was 3 days worth of work and 5 minutes worth of voice over work, I'm still uncredited because they can't take it away from, like, let's say like the Howie Mandel. Like I know 3 other people that did Mogwai's voice, but Howie Mandel got the credit as Mogwai. So sure. I think Bob Bergen, who does Porky Pig, was Mogwai as well. He can say he did the voice, but he can't like say he was the voice. So it was the kind of same thing for myself and the character that was played by Stripe. And there was a movie theater filled with, gremlins eating popcorn and, me doing voices for those things. So, I wish I would have had a larger role with that because it was one of my favorite movies for years and years. Indiana Jones, same thing. But it was weird to say, like, what were your roles? I was the 3 Indian kids in the cave while Indiana Jones was getting his heart pulled out. Remember the 3 Indian? They were like, the credit is slave children. Mm-hmm. Right. So I was the 3 slave children. And my wife, that was like one of her favorite movies. And to this day, she's like, that doesn't sound like you. And I'm like, acting, that's why I wasn't. Ta-da! Ta-da! It doesn't sound like you. And I'm like, well, and I do the voice. And she's like, well, it sort of sounds like you. And I'm like, well, that was 40 years ago. And a little
bit of vocal cord change,
a little bit, big deal. But she sees the residual check from it. So she knows I was there.
Yeah, I can see how IMDb would have helped you out as a young man.
For sure.
No. I said I wasn't. See, right here. It's there. It's a thing.
Yeah, it's like I mostly kept it to myself. The people that knew me, really, really knew me, knew about it because it came up in conversation, or girlfriends that we would laugh because, like I always say now, that all of my residuals are really small, like everyone else's from did stuff 40 years ago. But the only thing I really get paid on still is the Charlie Brown stuff. So when I get paid for Charlie Brown stuff, it comes in not little waves, but like a tsunami wave of, for some reason, they'll do the series. So there were a lot of episodes. I get paid per episode. And then there was the specials. And it's sort of like I open my mailbox and there's like 50 checks. And there's like, it's like a 3-inch stack. And we just laugh. We just laugh because it's like, I won't see anything for a while there. I get it and I walk it into the bank and see the eye roll of the bank teller who has to process all of them. And some people I know, they get 90 checks. Now it's direct deposited, but it's, when you get your checks for your series, it's kind of like, that's the data. You go celebrate. Everybody that I know, they have the one check that they still make money from, the one show.
I follow a guy on TikTok. He was one from the movie Hook.
Dante Basco.
Yeah. So Dante does a
I didn't have
I think on TikTok
on him.
where he'll fan out the checks that he gets.
Yeah.
And he does the roulette wheel.
What am I eating today?
Exactly.
Yeah,
am I getting steak or am I getting French fries? And I love that. It's kind of funny to watch because sometimes he's opened it up and he's like, yeah, we're going for steak and shrimp tonight. Yeah. And then there's other times he's like, well, that's a Pop-Tart.
Oh,
I saw one where it was the postage was more than the check was worth.
Yeah. I have a few of those where I get a lot of 1 cent. There's a bunch of us get 1 cent. I have a check. I wish I would have saved it and framed it. It was 0.00. I got a fraction of a cent. I got a check for a fraction of a cent, and they have to pay you. And it was 0.00. I laughed. I called up SAG and asked, why did you send it? They're like, we have to send it. It's part of payroll. And it was only once. So, but I think I've got maybe 5 or 10, 1 cent ones. The majority of them are like between $6 and $15 after tax. And there's an old famous bar in Studio City called Residuals. And the gimmick of this bar, Residuals, is if you bring them a residual check, they'll give you a beer. So, a lot of times a bunch of us will save our really bad, 5 or 6 of our really bad residual checks. And we'll like, all right, I've got 10, let's go meet. And we head up to, it's about 10 minutes away. We head up there and
nice.
We share some beers and play pool or, play darts or whatever is available.
That's
great
funny.
concept for a bar.
It's been there as long as I can remember. I haven't been there in a few years.
That's cool.
I know the bar is still there, but I'm hoping they still have the free beer for the residual check. I'm sure they would.
It is a cool concept. And I can only imagine with that global pandemic thing that kind of happened that, of course, you haven't been there in a while.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if nobody went anywhere for a while, but I would only assume that they own the property. They've been there for a really long time.
Yeah.
If they're still there, which I know they are, they had to have owned the property.
Right. There's no way they would have made it through otherwise.
No, there's nobody. There's so many places around here that are gone. Sadly, same as everywhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sort of piggybacking off of Tim's question and talking about that you worked for Steven Spielberg's films. You've gotten to work on some really cool sets with some pretty big names. Right. So do you ever look back on it and just kind of like let your mind be blown on what you were a part of?
I already have. I did that probably like 2000, like mid 2000s. It really hit me. I mean, it did a little bit for the most part earlier, but towards like the mid 2000s, more as people were asking me to do Comic-Con stuff. Mm-hmm. Is kind of like a self-reflective. I looked more at when IMDb was first coming out, and I'd look at the greater cast of the stuff that I'd done and realized like people that I'd worked with. Most of them, because of my memory is just fried, like off the top of my head. I can remember like Claude Akins, like I'd worked with Claude Akins. And I'm like Sheriff Lobo, just like little things of,
right.
I never, the guy that was in Fast and the Furious, who was the one that passed away from a car accident.
Oh, Paul Walker.
Paul Walker. I worked with Paul Walker. And I'm like, I never even knew I worked with Paul Walker. It was on Monster in the Closet. And it was a tiny little film from Troma. And he was in Monster in the Closet. And I was like, little things where I didn't even realize certain people that I'd worked with. Even like with Charlie Brown, with Charles Schultz. And not a lot of people know that not every character even really met him, much less worked with him. It was a very small group of kids that actually worked with him. Myself, I was fortunate to be one of them because of the Charlie Brown and Snoopy show was his brainchild. That was all of the vignettes in the show were based directly off of the strip. That's his work, as opposed to the specials that were more the work of Bill Mendelsohn Bill Melendez and Lee Mendelsohn. They were written by someone else, and kind of given the, is this okay, from Charles Schultz, and he would say yes, and it was, his show.
Gotcha. But
with the Charlie Brown and Snoopy show, he was there on the set in the recording studio, and we got to talk to him and interact with him. And, as a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, it was kind of weird to me to, like, if I was buddy with an older gentleman, it would be a little weird. Mm-hmm. I never realized. I knew he was the boss. I knew who he was, but I didn't like freak out fanboy on him because I didn't know who he really was. You know what I mean? Like I didn't grasp who he was at the time. And also you got to remember when I was doing The Voice, we were only celebrating the 20th anniversary of the show. So it wasn't, I think now what are we in, like the 50th of the show? I think now we're doing more than 50 years of the show, 70 years of the strip. It's a different feel now. He was iconic then, but now it's more like he's the legend. So many more now. But yeah, like I worked with some really crazy cool actors and it never really fazed me. I've only gotten 2 autographs in my entire life from people. One of them was recent, right before the pandemic, January of 2020. I got to meet William Catt, the greatest American hero. I was part of I met him at the Hollywood show in Burbank. And I've been kind of chasing him in a sense for 40 years. I wrote to his fan club back in 1981, and they sent me this horrible little 5x7 that was machine inked. Like it wasn't it was his signature, then robot machine inked onto it. And I remember thinking, this is cool. But as I got older, I realized that he never signed it. So I started doing shows, Comic-Con shows in 2008. And I've always been like looking for him. Like when I see him, he's signing my damn photograph. I'm getting a signature. And, my friend Scotty called me and told me he's down here. You get your picture and get down here. And it's still like mint in the original envelope. I got to meet him and talk with him and explain to him my 10-year-old frustration of getting my little awesome fake autograph. And he's like, do you want a new picture? Didn't want any of his pictures. All I wanted was my picture, my crappy little headshot 5x7. And it's kind of like double signed now. And he wrote, "This is the real signature" on it. That means more to me than like pretty much any other person that I've ever met, because that was so personal to me. Yeah. Otherwise, everyone else is kind of like they're working actors. I don't think there was really, it was Ralph Hinckley from The Greatest American Hero and Duncan MacLeod from Highlander. Those were the 2 people like that I wanted their autographs. Otherwise, everyone else kind of to me is either like a friend or just a regular working actor that I'm just happy to hang out with and meet.
Sure.
Now I can count him as a friend, but that autograph fan thing, I really never got with anybody. I think it was because you're in the same industry.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You don't see them as, I can watch TV and I see like a sitcom. I don't see the house. I see half of the house, and above it is lights and boom mics, and I've seen behind the curtain.
Yeah, you got to see how the sausage was made. It's a little different for you.
Tastes different.
I get that. I get that. All right, Brad, we have one final question for you. We like to call it our silly question.
Okay.
You may answer this as serious or silly as you like. If you were to write an autobiography, who would you have help you write it, and what would its title be?
Who would I have help me write it? It used to be, what's his name? Did the Penguin, Morgan Freeman.
Okay.
Because when I hear Morgan Freeman's voice now narrating something, I start laughing. It's just because he's like God, from the. Yeah. I don't think of him as like March of the Penguins, Morgan Freeman. I think of him as like he's trying not to be funny. So in regards to who would narrate it, it would probably wind up being Morgan Freeman, Samuel L. Jackson, but the Samuel L. Jackson with the MF, like just the full force of Samuel Jackson.
The full Samuel.
The full Samuel L. Jackson. What was the second part of the question?
And what would its title be?
The title would be Good Grief. It would have to be Good Grief.
In fact, I told my buddy Tommy that I was going to be talking to you and that you were the voice of Charlie Brown, and his response was "Good grief." So. Yeah,
that's been my favorite quote my whole life.
Oh, it's appropriate.
Yeah, good or grief.
There you go.
But it's either Morgan Freeman or Sam Jackson.
All right, solid.
Brad, thank you so much for being on a show with us today. Where can our viewers and our listeners go to find out more about you and what you've got coming?
Well, let me see. I'm in the process of, I used to have a bigger website, just at bradkesten.com. It's kind of tiny right now. It's going to be, growing. Not doing as many Comic-Con shows as I will be next year in 2023, once the airlines get their respective bleep together and stop canceling flights and stranding us in bizarre airports. I'll wind up doing more shows. I think the next show, let me see, thought I had it on the top of my head. I do not, but I have it right here. It is, West Texas Comic-Con in Lubbock, Texas, July 16th and 17th. So, and then let's see what I want to do from there. If I want to kind of just end it for the year and let the airlines fix themselves and COVID kind of fix itself.
Sure.
Committing to a whole series of fun and debauchery on the road.
If you don't want to and you want to risk the airlines, I'm sure we could get you in touch with some for the Monroe Pop Fest, which is a small Comic-Con in Michigan.
I'll have to look that one up. Where is that one?
Monroe. It's right outside of Detroit.
Ooh, fun. I'll check that one out.
All right.
Check that one out. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. We are definitely going to link your website, and we will make sure that people know that you're going to be in Texas for that Comic-Con.
I will. And I'll have a list of the other shows as they come on.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, we just want to remind you that subscribing is the single most important thing that you can do to help our show continue to grow. And we get more amazing guests like Brad Kesten here, the voice of Charlie Brown, to join us and have these great conversations and have some laughs. So please subscribe. It helps more than you're ever going to know. And it should be that little button that's popping up on the screen right about now. John, our editor, will put it up there for you. So remember, kids, pop culture, it's all around us, influencing every single part of our life. So be sure to come back next week. We'll have your pop culture fix waiting right here for you on Pop Culture Addicts.
Copyright 2025 FSF Podcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpopcast.com.